Hello, I'm Mike Brock from Michael Brock Counseling and Evaluation Services. Today we're going to talk about the devil is in the details, 10 steps to salvation at the driver's license hearing. The first thing to remember is that most people who lose their driver's license appeal beat themselves. According to their reports, lawyers who are good win close to 95% of their cases. Some call me after every hearing, so I know what they're doing. I have no stats for clients who represent themselves, but many of them return to me for a follow-up evaluation to get their full license back after they've driven for a year with their interlock device. So my sense is that most of my clients are successful. The Secretary of State states that they give a license back around half of the time. So what accounts for the discrepancy between what the lawyers are telling me they're doing with my evaluations and what the Secretary of State is actually doing? I believe it's because there's so many ways to beat yourself, and if you aren't a stickler for details, it's easy to find one. Here's a partial list of some of the details that get overlooked. 1. Not having your driving record at the evaluation or not at least knowing the dates of your arrests or convictions for your offenses. Consequently, you may be guessing wrong about how many arrests you've had and how long you've been sober. Both of these things are very important to the hearing officer. This includes arrests for drunk and disorderly or drug paraphernalia, which the hearing officer is not going to believe were mistakes. Unimportant because you don't think they're important, or that you were abstinent when they occurred. The hearing officer is going to view those the same as he views a drunk driving arrest. And they must be on the evaluation, or he thinks you're hiding something. The minute he thinks you're hiding something, it's over. 2, thinking that being off by a year because it was so long ago is not a big deal. It is a big deal. You are not applying for a job where experience may be desirable regardless of when you had it. This is a court of law, and time matters. If you are off by a year on your arrest date and you are off by a year on your sobriety date, you will be denied. 3, not having records or memory of specific treatment or involvement in AA. Now, it is hard to get records. I recognize that. Even when you try to get them and you pay for them from the treatment facilities, a lot of times they're slow to get them, or they won't get them, or maybe the place is even closed down and you can't get them. Regardless, you have to have some idea of when and where you went to treatment, and if you have accurate records, it's helpful. It's also really a good idea to get signatures from AA so that you can prove that you were at AA meetings. You should also be able to say something about what treatment consisted of, or where you went to AA meetings, and what some of the steps are, the steps that you've worked, what the Serenity Prayer is. You should be able to recite that, or who Bill W. and Dr. Bob are. They expect you to know the basic things that an active member of AA would know if you say you're in AA. If you don't say that you're in AA, then you should be able to tell them what you are doing toward positive sobriety. 4, thinking that telling a hearing officer that everyone was BSing at the meetings and they were a waste of your time and that you weren't paying attention will be a sufficient rationale for why you didn't get anything out of AA. You're better off just to say that I went to a few meetings and I found a better way for me to stay sober, and try to make that case. Hearing officers mostly have a positive view of AA. They will not want to hear you run it down. If you don't go, it's okay to be positive about the things that you're doing that are working for you. But running down what works for others is not helpful. 5. Having discrepancies between the substance use evaluation and the request for hearing form, which is the part that you fill out. Your letters of support are what you say at the meeting. They're asking you the same thing 4 times. One time in the evaluation, one time in the 257 that you fill out, again in the letters that you get of support, and at the hearing itself. You have to say the same thing all 4 times. If everything doesn't match up, you will be denied. If your people who write letters for you don't know when you had your last drink or drug, you need to tell them. They're not expected to know that unless you tell them, but they are vouching for the fact that you've been sober as long as you say you have. That's the primary reason for having them write this letter. So you must tell them when you had your last drink, at least month and year of last drink or drug. Also, if your letters are not signed, dated, and notarized, and don't have contact information for the person writing the letter, they are not useful. If you don't have at least 3 useful letters, and I tell people to get 6, if you don't have at least 3 useful letters, you have not met the minimum requirements to get your license back, and you will be denied. Point number 6, not knowing what's in the evaluation, like your last drink or drug date. So you can have that in all your information, but if you don't know it when the hearing officer asks you when you had your last drink or drug, then you will be denied. Some of this stuff may be hard to pin down exactly. Even AA members don't always know when they had their last marijuana. They might know when they had their last drink. Okay, but if they quit using pot or acid before they quit using alcohol, then they may not know this stuff. But once you have taken an accurate guess, and it's on paper, it's the gospel, according to you, and any changes will be viewed as either you don't know and you're guessing, or you're deliberately lying to somebody, either to the hearing officer or to the evaluator. Either way, they're going to see you as dishonest, and they're not going to give you a license. 7, not having your prior evaluation with all the different dates, facts, and opinions you gave the hearing officer last time. If you did a prior eval, it's really helpful to know what you put in that prior evaluation. So if you have a copy of it, you should bring it with you to this eval. If your estimations of how long you've been sober, or your information regarding when your arrests were, when you did treatment, where you did treatment, what your involvement in AA has been, are radically different in the evaluation that you do with me to the one you did before, unless we can explain that as I now have accurate information and I didn't have it before, you are giving them 2 different opinions on 2 different dates, and that will be viewed with suspicion. Accuracy and consistency is a huge factor in determining your credibility. So, to the extent possible, keep whatever evidence you have and bring it with you to the evaluation so that we can construct an accurate timeline. 8, not having your last rejection letter with the instructions from the hearing officer of what needs to be done before he might consider giving you a license at the next hearing. This is very important, because if they give you some instructions, such as they want you to go to more AA meetings and get signatures, or they want you to go through a treatment program or some counseling, they expect you to do that and to meet those requirements before you come back and reapply for a license. If you haven't done it, you haven't followed their instructions, they are not going to view that positively, and your chances of getting a license back are greatly reduced. If you don't have the letter as to why you denied it, we can't even address the specific reasons they had for denying your last appeal. And they do expect that to be addressed in my evaluation. So keep those letters and bring them with you. And if you don't have them, ask them for another one. Or if you remember at least why they denied you, then we can address that. But if you don't, we can't address it. They will view that as a shortcoming in the evaluation and make it less likely that you will be successful in your appeal. 9, you can't fish for information at the hearing. You have to know it. If you don't know before you go in, you will lose. If they ask you something from that evaluation, like how long you've been sober, when you had your last drink, where you go to AA meetings, what step you're working at the time, which is a common question. Anything that's in the evidence that you submit that they ask you, they expect you to know. So it's very important that you go over the materials before you go in. If you have trouble reading the evaluation or other written materials, and some people might have more difficulty with reading than others, find someone who can read it to you and have them read it to you several times. In this way, at least you'll be familiar with what's in the eval. And finally, number 10 is for lawyers. Lawyers tell me that 90% of the case is decided before the hearing ever takes place. So that means the evidence that you submit is more important than what actually takes place at the hearing itself, unless you go in there and completely sabotage yourself. So lining up evidence and preparing your clients is where lawyers really earn their fees in these cases. The days of just showing up to the hearing and winging it are gone. If I were an attorney, I would certainly choose who does my evaluations. Some attorneys still tell their clients, go here, go find some place to get an evaluation. That might be a good evaluation or a bad evaluation. And sometimes people will make that decision based on price, which is also extremely unwise because you tend to get what you pay for. But it is very important that you prepare well for the hearing, that you not be sloppy about your written materials that you submit. If your written materials are good, if you have enough sobriety, and you handle yourself well at the hearing, which means basically answering the question and stop talking, then you have a very good chance of getting your license back and being able to drive again, which is what this is all about. Thank you. Have a good